Her words cut through the living room like a knife. "We're not your bank anymore," Mom snapped, her voice sharp with smugness. Lena froze in the doorway, backpack still hanging off one shoulder. She'd come downstairs expecting the usual rushed morning coffee cups, car keys, a half-hearted goodbye, but instead got a sentence that made the air feel heavy. Dad sat on the couch pretending to read the news on his phone, but his eyes kept drifting over the screen like he was waiting for something to explode. For months, money had been the silent enemy in their house. It started with small comments, Mom reminding Lena that electricity wasn't free, Dad asking why she needed another pair of shoes. But lately, the reminders had turned into arguments. Lena worked part-time after school, but between tuition, gas, and helping her little brother, there was never enough. She'd only asked for a bit of help to cover the last payment for her class trip. She thought they'd at least talk about it. Instead, Mom acted like she'd been waiting for the moment to drop that line. Lena tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. "I wasn't asking for a handout. I just needed a little help this one time." Mom crossed her arms and glanced at Dad as if looking for backup. He cleared his throat, but said nothing. The silence felt worse than yelling. The tension didn't match the quiet morning outside. The clock ticked, the kettle steamed, and somewhere down the hall, her brother hummed a cartoon theme. Yet in that moment, it felt like something in their family had split. Suspense hung in the air. Was this just anger talking? Or had they really decided they were done supporting her altogether? Lena could feel her face warming, but she refused to show the sting. Before she could respond again, something unexpected happened. A sound from the kitchen broke the silence, followed by footsteps, panicked, and definitely not part of the normal morning routine. And within minutes, everything shifted in a way none of them saw coming. The footsteps belonged to her little brother, Max. He raced into the living room, his socks sliding on the hardwood floor. He didn't say a word, he just stood there wide-eyed, clutching the edge of his shirt like he'd seen a ghost. Mom's expression changed for a second, but only long enough to glance past him toward the kitchen. Lena felt her pulse jump, even though she didn't know why. Dad finally set his phone down, his brow tightening as he listened for whatever Max was reacting to. Before anyone could ask, a loud thud echoed from the back of the house. It wasn't something falling off a counter. It sounded heavier, like furniture had been bumped or someone had slammed a door. The sound lingered in all their faces. Lena glanced at Mom, expecting her to break the silence, but she just pressed her lips together. Dad stood up slowly, his steps careful but tense, like he was trying not to show he was nervous. Max moved closer to Lena, not speaking, but clearly unsettled. She rested a hand on his shoulder without thinking. Whatever argument had started a moment ago was now swallowed by something else, something none of them understood yet. The kettle finally squealed from the kitchen, its whistle muffled by the walls. But nobody moved to turn it off. Lena thought back to the past few weeks. Strange phone calls at odd hours. Whispered conversations between her parents when they thought she was asleep. Bills tucked into drawers instead of sitting on the counter like usual. She'd assumed they were just trying to avoid stress or hide another overdue notice. Now she wasn't so sure. The idea that this was about more than money crept into her mind. It wasn't just the "we're not your bank anymore" comment. It was the way her parents had been acting tired but secretive, as if they were bracing for something. Lena looked at Dad as he disappeared around the corner toward the kitchen, and she realized she wasn't sure she wanted to know what he was about to find. Dad's footsteps faded into the hallway, and the house seemed to hold its breath. Lena kept her arm around Max as Mom slowly moved toward the doorway, her earlier smugness replaced with something harder to read: worry, maybe, or fear she didn't want to show. Lena had never seen her hesitate like that. Another soft bump came from the back of the house. Not loud this time, just enough to make Max flinch. Lena swallowed and tried to listen past the thud of her own heartbeat. Dad didn't call out, and that silence made everything worse. The kettle finally stopped whistling on its own. But the quiet after was thick. Lena's mind wandered back to a few nights earlier when she'd overheard her parents in the garage. Their voices were low, the kind of tone people use when they don't want kids to hear. She remembered her dad saying something about running out of time, and her mom snapping back that they couldn't keep covering for everyone. Lena hadn't understood what that meant. She'd assumed it was about bills piling up. But now, with unexplained noises and strange energy in the air, it felt like something else. Max tugged gently on her sleeve. "Is someone here?" he whispered. Lena didn't want to answer. She glanced toward the back hallway just as Mom turned halfway around and gave them a look that clearly said, "Stay put." There was another layer to all of this that Lena couldn't ignore her. Older cousin Jamie had been staying with them on and off for a month. Jamie said it was just until she found a new place, but she never explained why she'd left her old one. Whenever Lena asked, her dad changed the subject, and her mom would busy herself in the kitchen. Jamie kept to herself, always locking the door to the guest room and taking calls outside on the porch. Even when it was freezing, the uneasy feeling that their family's secrets were about to collide with something real made Lena's stomach twist. She didn't know if the noise was connected to Jamie, the money problems, or something else entirely. All she knew was that whatever was happening, it was bigger than a fight about money, and it was just beginning to surface. A sharp creak came from the far end of the hallway, the kind of sound old floors make when someone is shifting their weight. Mom froze in the doorway, one hand lightly pressed to the wall, as if bracing herself. She tilted her head, listening. Lena held her breath, her fingers tightening around Max's shoulder. The house wasn't noisy by nature. Every sound had a source. And this one wasn't accidental. Dad still hadn't said a word from the kitchen, and that silence made everything more unsettling. Usually, he filled tension with noise, clearing his throat, moving something, pretending things were fine. Now, there was nothing. Just the creak. Then stillness. Lena leaned forward, trying to hear beyond the hallway. Her mind flashed to the night she'd seen Jamie slip out of the guest room and head toward the back door with a small duffel bag. Jamie hadn't noticed her watching. She'd moved like someone trying not to wake a dog that might bite. Lena remembered thinking it was weird, but assumed it was just personal drama no one wanted to explain. Now, that memory pressed at her like a warning she should have paid attention to sooner. Max whispered again. "Should I get my shoes?" He didn't say why, but Lena knew he meant in case they had to leave. She shook her head, but couldn't promise they wouldn't. Mom finally glanced back at them and opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a muffled voice came from the kitchen, low and urgent. It didn't sound like Dad talking to himself. Mom's eyes widened, not dramatically, just enough that Lena caught it. She stepped fully into the hallway and disappeared around the corner, leaving Lena and Max by the couch, frozen between fear and curiosity. Another noise followed, something metallic hitting tile, then a drawer sliding open. Max's breathing turned shaky, but he tried not to make a sound. Lena's pulse thudded in her ears as she strained to make out the words drifting back toward them. She couldn't tell if it was anger, panic, or something darker. But she knew one thing for sure. The moment before the truth breaks always feels quieter than it should. Lena inched a step closer to the hallway, careful not to make the floor creak. Max clung to the sleeve of her hoodie but didn't try to stop her. The muffled voice from the kitchen grew clearer, but it wasn't Dad's. It was lower, unfamiliar, and too calm for how tense the house felt. She caught fragments, something about finding it before they do, and no more chances. Her stomach nodded. Then came another voice. This time it was Jamie, hearing Her cousin's name whispered, and the tension made everything tilt. Jamie wasn't supposed to be back. She had left early that morning, saying she wouldn't return until late. The fact that she was suddenly in the kitchen, talking to someone they didn't know, made the air feel dangerous. Mom spoke next, her tone tight but controlled. "You can't handle this here. The kids are home." There was no smugness now, no sharp edges, just fear layered under anger. Lena had never heard that mix in her mother's voice before. Max looked up at her with wide eyes. "Jamie's here," he mouthed. Lena nodded, just enough for him to understand. A chair scraped against the tile. Dad finally spoke, but his voice was low and strained. "We said we'd keep it safe for a little while. That was it. We didn't sign up for this." Lena's heartbeat thudded harder. "Keep what's safe." Footsteps moved closer to the doorway, heavier than her dad's. Not as light as Jamie's. Lena instinctively pulled Max back a few feet, her mind racing. She had always thought the family tension was about unpaid bills, maybe a hidden debt or job loss. But now, with strangers in their kitchen and her cousin wrapped up in something secretive, that idea felt too small. Another sound came from the front of the house, 3 quick knocks at the door. Not loud, but firm.